Welcome to Boxing During Dinner. We're obviously not at Randazzo's.
No, regretfully.
We're at my house. This was like an impromptu edition of Boxing During Dinner.
It's a nice place, though. Thanks very much for having us here.
It is a nice place, and you're welcome. And welcome to my home. I mean, you guys have been here before. Namely, I think Labor Day we were outside filming, and we've been here at this table doing Boxing During Dinner before. Before we begin, David, I want to mention next week at Randazzo's we're gonna have our friend Donnie Garcia over, and he's going to be talking about his company, IronImpactNutrition.com, where you can buy all your supplements. If you guys do work out, I don't work out that much, but David does. Yep. And wait till you guys see Donnie, because his forearms are bigger than like my head.
He's a big guy.
So you could ask him whatever you're taking, Donnie, we will buy from your site and start working out ASAP, because he's pretty huge. Yeah. and he's a good guy, good company. He's going to be talking about that next week. But what we're going to be talking about today is a big fight coming up this weekend, and it's probably the most asked about fight that people asking me about it in years. And it's Guillermo Rigondeaux and Nonito Donaire. And they're asking me not because of the magnitude of the fight, David. That's not it. It's because I'm Cuban American. I do live in Miami, and there's like 99% Cubans down here. So obviously they keep asking me about
looking at the 1%
about this fight. Exactly. David's like a huge minority here in Miami, but David, it's an interesting fight, and the question I get asked the most is, ¿Tú crees que Rigondeaux va a ganar? You think Rigondeaux's gonna win? Obviously, all the Cubans at my job, and I tell them, to be honest, no. And they all look at me like if I'm an alien, and I'm like, first of all, everything that's comes from Cuba isn't the best thing ever made. And
except for Armando.
I know the Cubans that come nowadays, they think all their athletes were the best. They think Teofilo Stevenson would have destroyed Muhammad Ali. He wouldn't have. They think Felix Savon would have destroyed Mike Tyson. He wouldn't have. And they think Guillermo Rigondeaux is going to be the next big, great champion. Don't get me wrong. I love Guillermo Rigondeaux. He was one of the most polished Cuban amateurs to come into the pro game. I remember one of the fights, in which you attended as well. You were there with me when Freddie Roach was training him. And I told Freddie Roach, he's a big puncher, and he's like, yeah, I'm trying to get him to understand he's a big puncher, and that's going to be his claim to fame as a pro. Right. But after that, he fires Roach. He resorts to his same amateur style. And I just don't see him beating Nonito Donaire. I mean, I think he could give him a good fight. If he does engage, he could knock out Donaire, because he does have that power. His power is very, very underrated. I just don't see it happening.
A lot of people don't, and I would be foolish if I sat here and said with 100% certainty that I thought Rigondeaux was going to win this fight. But a lot of me does think he's going to win this fight, and a lot of it has more to do with Donaire than it does with Rigondeaux. Now, we remember, you and I both had said the same thing. Our criticism of Donaire in many of his past, we'll say, 5 or 6 fights really, which only takes us about a year and a half in.
Right.
But against guys like Wilfredo Vasquez Jr., for example, where he's too anxious in there and he gets bored and he starts pot-shotting around and making ill-advised decisions. When Nonito Donaire is on his game, and in his defense in his past couple fights he has been, but let's consider one of his last opponents was Jorge Arce. I probably could have walked in at that weight and beat him that night too, but Donaire has to be on his A game the entire fight in order to beat Guillermo Rigondeaux. If he is, then yes, I think Nonito Donaire wins this fight going away. But Guillermo Rigondeaux is in a position, I think he's going to give Donaire trouble very early in the fight, and I think that a lot of people who are even picking Donaire to win by decision or knockout think that's going to happen too. They do believe that Rigondeaux is going to give him trouble in the early going. What happens at that point is, does Donaire figure him out and start to assert his game plan? They're both counterpunchers, so who knows who's going to start really putting their foot on the gas? Or does he resort to pot-shotting and making some ill-advised decisions and end up on his ass because Rigondeaux's power really does show up and counterpunching him at the right time?
Rigondeaux does hit hard, but speaking of pot-shotting, Guillermo Rigondeaux is the pot-shotting champion of the world, and because of the amateur game, you can't go 500 fights fighting a certain style to accumulate points and win gold medals, and then think somehow you're gonna change it, tenfold when you get to the pros. And it's not his fault. He's a great fighter, and he does deserve to be in there with Nonito Donaire after 10, 11 fights. But the thing with Guillermo Rigondeaux is that he shows periods of excellence, of Hall of Fame boxing qualities.
When he's combination punching.
And then he resorts to go back to, Athens 2004 when he's trying to win a gold medal. Good story. In the complex that I used to live in, it was Cuban security guard. And I used to stay out there talking boxing with him for hours. And he told me one day, hey, Rigondeaux's fighting tonight, right? I'm going to come over. So the complex wasn't well secured at the time, but he came into my apartment to watch the fight. And I remember he knocked down, it was against Rico Ramos. He knocked down Rico Ramos right away. I'm like, that's it. He has him out. And the next 3 rounds, he proceeded to do this, that the security guard, who was a huge Guillermo Rigondeaux fan, he said, this sucks. He stood up and he left. To I guess to the joy of the community that no burglars are gonna break in, but to the he was upset at Guillermo Rigondeaux style. And his last fight against Roberto Marroquin, he got hurt a couple times, and Roberto Marroquin is not a great fighter by any stretch of the imagination. So this is Nonito Donaire, not some second-rate fighter from Texas.
Right, and that's the thing. What I like and I think is so scintillating about this fight is that if either of these guys puts on their best performance, they can both beat the other. But Donaire's had up and down performances, admittedly less of them, I guess, than Rigondeaux has. But Rigondeaux's got the exact same issue. These guys are both absolutely, talent-wise, maybe 2 of the best 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. And I know I usually tell you you're the one with hyperbole, but I really do believe that. Skill-wise, when these guys are at their best, there's almost no one as good as them. But Absolutely. Who are you going to get? I think that there's going to be a tendency for them both to bring their absolute best, and we're going to see a technical fight to a magnitude that we haven't seen in years. I hope.
Right, and another thing, with Nonito Donaire, there's always been, I guess that, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like continuity and no, but I'm saying in a good aspect, same trainer, same promoter, same manager, He's been consistent, and Guillermo Rigondeaux not so much. He's had the management issues. He's he's changed trainers. It does play into a fight of this magnitude. I'm not saying Rigondeaux's gonna get shut out. I mean, he might knock down Donaire. He might even win this fight. I just don't see it happening. As a Cuban American, I would love to see him win this fight. Nothing against Nonito Donaire and my Filipino friends. It's just you
don't have many, not on this show.
you do want that I guess that Cuban aura from like back then, the Kid Chocolates, the Kid Gavilan, Luis Manuel Rodriguez, Jose Napoles. You want to see that come through again. He's just fighting a great fighter at the wrong point of his career and at the wrong point of history. Because if Guillermo Rigondeaux becomes a pro, way back when, after he wins his first gold medal, we might be talking a different scenario here. Right. Just a lot of fights as an amateur. And I just don't think it'll change. I see Nonito Donaire probably stopping him in the later rounds.
I'm going to go with, because controversy sells it, and part of me is not, I'm not a Cuban American, but part of me has the same affinity for Cuban fighters because of our experience seeing so many of these guys here in Miami. I mean, we went to fights with Gamboa, fights with Lara, fights with Rigondeaux. We've seen all these guys here locally. Part of me is kind of like, feel like we rose them up as our children, even though they're older than us. But I'm going to go with Rigondeaux by a surprising split decision victory that actually has people surprised that Rigondeaux got a decision against a top-ranked fighter in Radio City Music Hall.
That would be an upset, and like you said about us seeing them as our children, even though Rigondeaux, I think he's listed at my age. I don't know if that's true or not. How old Rigondeaux is. But I was there in his first press conference when he came to the States, which he was wearing. This impeccable suit, and I told him, dude, you're dressed for the part. Congratulations, you could be a superstar right now the way you're dressed. So I would like to see him do well. Just don't see him winning this fight. A guy I do see winning on Friday night is Angelo Santana. And he may be the most underrated, and I've said it here before, and I'm not afraid to say it. He may be the best Cuban fighter of them all. When it's all said and done, he's a great fighter, and not that many people talk about him. He's still promoted by Don King, which, 15, 20 years ago would have been great. Everybody would have known Angelo Santana. Not so much in 2013. But he's fighting a late replacement whose name I probably would butcher.
And I can't pronounce it
and but you know, he's a great fighter to watch. So watch Showbox.
I won't name names, but we know a fighter several weight classes north of Angelo Santana who says he hits harder than guys that he has sparred who are light heavyweights, super middleweights, cruiserweights, that Santana hits harder pound for pound than those guys.
And he has quick hands. I mean, his knockout of Johnny Garcia on the last Showbox.
Yeah.
But see, the thing was that I asked people, did you see that card? I mean, people during the Pacquiao-Marquez fight, almost nobody saw it. And I was trying to tell people what a treat it was to see Angelo Santana fight that night.
Yeah.
I looked it up on YouTube. I couldn't find the fight either. I mean,
of course not, because no one else was watching it to record it.
Nobody was watching it. It's amazing. But before we talk about these past weekend fights really quick, we're going to go to some Facebook questions.
That's right.
Asked by some of our...
We're going to try to start doing this every week, because I think it's awesome that we get feedback directly from you guys. And these questions, a couple of them are pretty good.
Casper Hoberg Madsen asked, did you guys ever do some amateur boxing yourselves? If by amateur boxing you mean put on gloves and beat up on my little brother, then yes, I did do amateur boxing. David?
I did some light training. I was wanting to prepare for an amateur fight, and did some sparring and everything, which to me was getting close. And then I broke my wrist, and I figured my frame didn't fit the weight anyway.
His second question I'm going to leave for a little later, which is, which fight are you looking forward to the most in 2013? We'll answer that now. How are the two of you not morbidly obese, eating out all the time?
Good question.
I have a really good metabolism. I literally ate ice cream every night for like 2 weeks and lost 10 pounds.
That's, I don't have the metabolism as good. I happen to be a pretty disciplined eater, except for the nights that we're at Randazzo's.
Brad Davis asked, when is David versus Armando?
That's a good fight.
I don't know. I think you outweigh me.
I do outweigh you. What do you walk around at?
147.
Yeah, so he's a welterweight, and I walk around at 168 for the most part, so I'm a super middleweight.
Yeah.
That's Mayweather versus Andre Ward. Not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Catchweight.
Steve Flores, which, who asked before? Casper had asked about the 2013 fight.
Steve is a buddy of ours from the West Coast, lives in L.A. Steve
asked, do you think Maidana and Matisse finally fight? And will it be more entertaining than Alvarado Rios? That may be the fight I'd be looking forward to the most in 2013. I don't know if it'll sell big in the States, just because two Argentinians don't sell as much as two Mexicans.
Right.
But will it be as great as Alvarado Rios? I say yes.
Yeah, I've got to say, Steve, I'm glad
just thinking about it. It's ridiculous.
I would love to see that fight.
Steve also asked. He asked a whole bunch of questions. Do you think Victor Ortiz will ever reach his full potential? No.
Nope.
Maybe dancing.
Maybe dancing.
Acting?
I heard he's not too good at dancing either.
Acting?
Look, Victor Ortiz
modeling?
He's not a bad-looking guy.
He has a nice smile, no?
I think his peak was in the Andre Berto fight, and his best bet is to hope that he fights Berto again.
Who should Andre Ward fight next?
Who cares? He just needs to fight somebody. Rumor is that he might get in there with Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. by the end of the year. Good. Andre Ward deserves some money.
Gennady Golovkin. That's the guy I want to see him fight against. But before we go, because we're almost out of time, this past weekend in China, a whole bunch of fights. Juan Estrada beats Brian Valoria. I think he looked impressive in that win.
Yep.
Wilfredo Vasquez Jr., a setback, but he's still a young fighter. I think he'll get back. We also saw Zhu Shiming, who I was not impressed with.
No.
Not for a guy making $300,000 in his pro debut.
And the guy made $75,000 a round. Freddie Roach said this guy was legit. A lot of people said he's legit. He's a superstar in China, to the level that they've said of guys like Yao Ming, which we know he had global appeal. But his appeal has to come from something, I'm sure. And his amateur pedigree is one thing.
His amateur pedigree is amazing. I just don't think it'll translate into the pro game.
And he's 31 years old. As much as people say, yeah, he'll get better, but I think what you saw is what you're going to get for the most part with him.
And the last fight, Rocky Martinez beat Diego Magdaleno by split decision. It was a good fight.
Yeah.
And out of the last three fights that Martinez won, this one was probably the one that he deserved the most. He gets it done. I mean, he's not a bad fighter. People vilify him on on Twitter because he got a controversial decision in his last fight, but it's not his fault.
He used the jab pretty well, used his reach advantage over Magdaleno, and I thought he fought a pretty smart fight.
And really Diego Magdaleno may be a good fighter down the road. I still think he was rushed into this title fight.
I do too, and Magdaleno reminds me of a lot of a guy who's almost a Victor Ortiz style, where he gets himself out of position when he's throwing punches and stuff like that. Doesn't throw the right combinations at the right time, but he's talented, and that you can't take away from him. He had really good moments, in that fight, but he's not ready yet.
And this is an exciting time, David, because this week is actually the 2-year anniversary of Boxing During Dinner.
Yeah.
So for the guys that have been watching, guys and women, and everybody, our fans, thanks for watching. And we're gonna actually have a Boxing During Dinner anniversary party April 26th here in Miami. So if you guys are in Miami,
at the Hoxton
and Brickell, you guys are more than welcome to come. And it's an exciting part of the year, David, because today we analyzed an upcoming fight, broke down some fights that happened. Next week we're gonna do the same thing with Rigondeaux Donaire, and then Canelo against Austin Trout. Then the following week we got Sergio Martinez, and the following week we got Mayweather Guerrero.
Let's not forget, on the same weekend that Martinez fights, you also have Zab Judah and Danny Garcia,
which is
there's other fights on that card too. So we are psyched. I mean, boxing is on a hot streak from March to May.
It's ridiculously hot, and it's gonna be good for us. Hopefully you guys keep watching us, and thanks for supporting Boxing During Dinner.